Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio, as always, is the new 2022 Eric Morin. I had to come up with something. I was sitting at home like, what? How could I introduce the first podcast of the new year? Because I feel like we've done a million intros at this point. How could I make this one in particular really good?
We've done a million. We've done a million podcasts. It feels like a lot, right?
Yes.
New year. It's a new year, right?
New year, new resolutions. I know everybody's probably got their list of things they want to accomplish. Hopefully they have it written down, put on the wall.
Are you a resolution setter, Matthew?
I am. You know me very well as far as goals. If I give myself goals, I will basically kill myself until I reach those goals. So it all depends on what the goal is. Each year it's a different goal for me. Okay. So I don't try to overload myself with, 5 or 10 goals. I typically do like 1 or 2 goals that I want to get accomplished, but they're meaty goals. They're not something that's, lose 10 pounds. No, it would be like lose 10 pounds, but grow 15 pounds of muscle, or take a trip to somewhere that's crazy nice and try to, backpack or do something different that isn't your typical New Year's resolution, because those things don't really get me going.
No,
they just, no.
It's gotta be big as hell to me. I think for me, like if a goal isn't huge, if it doesn't cause me a little bit of anxiety and stress, then I didn't set a big enough goal. If it doesn't make me excited to get out of bed, then it's not a big enough goal. I feel like it's got to be something that's really profound, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be like, if this happens in 12 months, my life has changed forever. Like it's got to be like monumental type goal, right? I feel like you're aligned with that, right? I mean, it's kind of the same way, right?
I want it to be big enough to where it gets me excited, but it doesn't make me stay awake.
Well, and here's we start off a new year, and so one of the things that happens, and a lot of doctors do not follow a rolling 12 or a trailing 12 in their accounting, and so because of that, it's almost like most of the people probably listening to this podcast are starting off with January 1st, even though technically speaking, that's basically an IRS thing, because if you want to think about it truthfully, because most of you don't follow a different fiscal year because you're not C Corps, and so therefore, most of you are thinking January is a reset, which if you're following a rolling 12 or trailing 12, it's really not, because you're looking every month the end of a year in a sense. So you're trying to max out every year. And so every month is trying to be maxed so that you increase your overall valuation every single month. But since I know most of you in listening to this podcast are not doing it correctly.
They're all like, it's a new year. It's a new start. I'm basically I make no money right now. It's a full start over.
Trust me, you go to sell your practice, nobody gives a crap about the year. They care about the trailing 12 and really what the last 12 months has looked like.
And I always think it's funny because in December, I typically have a decent amount of calls because of breaks and things like that. Practices will call me. Sure. Well, I always ask, they fill out a questionnaire even before they come to us. And I always ask, what's your revenues look like? What's the size of your practice? And it's funny how towards the end of the year, I can get that answer. And at the beginning of the year, they nonchalantly are just like, yeah, I think we're around this, or we're this, and they don't have a concrete answer. But at the end of the year, they're like, oh, I'm exactly 1.952 with an overhead of blank. And I'm like, isn't that interesting?
Well, the problem is, and just so you guys are aware, those of you who listen, why would you not want to use an annual year? I think that's probably a good topic of conversation to start the year. And we've talked about it before on this podcast, but I'll talk about it again for those of you that are new to the podcast, is that ideally speaking, if you do, let's just say you have so let's go to weight, because weight and like exercise is it's analogous to running a business. And the fact that we start January 1st with these giant goals, and I got people who are like, I'm going to lose 30 pounds and so they start with these giant goals. And then what happens is because they've given them 12 months, they're like, well, I'm going to give myself 30 days or 45 days. And what ends up happening is because they believe that even if they don't lose weight in January, February, March, April, May, June, they still have July, August, September, October, November. Oh, but then the holidays come. And so what ends up happening is because they believe they have 12 months. So go back to the dental. February tends to be a down month in dental. And it tends to be a down month because of snowstorms and because of it's a short month and all these other things. And so so what people do is because they're not using a rolling 12, what happens is when we get to March, then they ultimately have decreased the valuation of their business if it went down. And so what happens is if you're using a calendar year, you tell yourself that's okay, we'll make it up in March. But ideally speaking, you don't want to look at it that way. Ideally speaking, you want to basically look at every month in a way to say, how do we make sure we maximize over the month before? Now, I'm not saying there's no seasonality. Of course, there's some seasonality to it. But ideally speaking, you want to, and if you're going to say, okay, well, I don't want to look at January and February and compare them because one's a long month, one's a shorter month. Okay, well, then look at the February before, but even then you would drop off when you do a rolling 12. And so you ideally want to beat the February before. Yeah. So it's one of these things where every day matters, every week matters. And isn't that true in life?
Well, you just said February is short. Do you have a crystal ball? Like, how did you know that February was going to be short and you knew it was going to be a down month? I think that's one of the other issues just to point out.
I'm just letting you know, anyone north of the Mason-Dixon line, I'm just letting you guys know it's going to snow in February. So if you guys want like Nostradamus predictions, it's going to snow in February. Now, I've said that before. If you, like I said, if you're a longtime listener, you know I've said this before. If you look what happened during COVID in June for a lot of practices is where they were able to get back into the practice in 2020. And you'll look at 2020 and people had extended hours. They came in on Saturdays. They did whatever they had to do to get those patients in. So there's an ability to do that. And the same thing should be happening ideally for February. You say, look, it's a short month, but we still need to get this many hours of clinical care in. And because we have to get this many hours of clinical care in, we ultimately need to expand hours. We need to work some late days. We need to do whatever. Well, my team doesn't want to do that. Look, I mean, ultimately, you need to get the team members who are willing to do that, and you need to talk to. Look, you need quit telling them this is how many hours a week, and tell them, look, this is how many clinical hours we need a month, and you know, maybe you change and look at it from that perspective and say we have to have this many clinical hours in a month to work, and then you work the clinical hours or units. Some practices use units instead of clinical hours.
Let me ask this question. So a lot of our listeners are, and we were looking through some of our practices, and we work with a lot of group practices. We worked with a lot of multi-locations. Should they look at this from an individual location standpoint or as a whole? Because a lot of times I'll get on the phone and they'll say, well, I have 3 locations, but they won't know what each location, they'll just give me the conglomerate number where they'll say, together, I'm a $15 million organization.
Well, that's a huge mistake. I think that every large corporation has what we call profit centers. And so you can call them departments, profit centers, whatever you want to call them. It's all synonymous. When we go back and look at this, it's like we just say, look, this is a location. What's the profitability? What are the ratios? If you don't have a separate P&L for that location, then you're making a mistake because you need a separate P&L for that location. I would never have a location without a separate P&L.
Yeah, and I think the issue is a lot of times they'll give me that number and they won't be able to pinpoint that because you have to think of each location as a single business.
Well, it sounds to me like that's a great New Year's resolution for some folks on listening right now. It's like make sure each location has its own profit center, so you know exactly what each location's doing. Because we work with a lot of group practices, so if you don't have that, you need to get that. Because and look, if you're thinking about valuation, if I'm going in to buy your group dental practice and I'm looking at valuation, I need to know what each location's doing ultimately, because I do want to know where I'm going to have to put resources. And so I think that's really important. Yeah. I think also when we get to the beginning of the year, let's talk about goal setting for a moment, because
perfect.
So one of the things we've been able to do is take somebody and move them quickly. So let's just say we took a practice from 5 to 10 million in 1 year, just using that. Now, what happens with that is we have to move from scarcity to abundance. And we actually had an internal conversation this week too about the same concept, which is people focus on either they throw goals out there that are gigantic, but they have no strategy to get there. I did 5 million this year. I'm gonna do 10 million. You're like, how are you gonna get there? I don't know. Work hard. Work hard is not a strategy.
Yeah.
So you'd have to put into it. Now, what will happen is you'll think about all the ways, all the costs to do that, and you start moving into scarcity mindset, which is like, we can't do that. It's going to cost us too much. We don't have enough people. We don't have, and so what ends up happening is you'll start thinking about all the reasons why you can't do it, which is I don't have the people, I don't have the doctors, I don't have the locations, I don't have the chairs. That's all scarcity mindset. It's focusing on what you don't have and where the hurdles are. You do want to figure out what the hurdles are, but you'd want to ask a better question, which is, what would I need to do this year to go from 5 million to 10 million? Now, it might be acquisition strategy versus organic growth, but we would look at that and say, what are the things I need to do? And instead of saying, I just can't find any doctors, just say, I would need to find 3 doctors. Who can help me do that? And so we would start looking at this and saying, but keep in mind that if you say you're going to go from 5 to 10, okay, and depending on how much revenue, what happens is people set these revenue goals. They have no plan how to get there. There's no roadmap. They just throw these damn goals against the wall. I say, damn goal. I was listening to this podcast, by the way, Matthew, recently. Sometimes I sound like angry, man. I'm not, and I was like listening to I think recent a soundbite, and I was like, man, you sound angry, man. And I'm like, I'm not angry. I'm passionate, right? I'm passionate. I'm trying to help people here. But I was listening to it. I'm like, man, you sound like an ass.
That's why I always say no phone calls before the podcast.
I think when we,
I will point out, if you hear barking in the background, people, I'm watching the in-laws' dogs. Okay. So there's a little Pomeranian that's losing it right now. His name's Ranger, and he's going crazy. So I apologize for the people that hear barking in the background.
See, if you're going to get a little dog, you got to get a little dog that doesn't bark, right? That's why I got a French bulldog, right? They don't bark. They just
New Year's resolution, train him not to bark.
But hey, that's what happens sometimes, right? It's okay. Yeah. I mean, and look, we are in a new age, and we're not gonna get into work from home stuff and all this other stuff and all that today. But I do want to say goals. So if you're supposed to pull in $500,000 a month in revenue, and all of a sudden this month you pulled in 412, well, what ends up happening is you got to now say, how do we make up the difference in February? We have a problem, because February is a short month. Yeah. And now you tell yourself, well, February is a short month. And by the way, we didn't know it was going to snow, which we did know it was going to snow. And so then all of a sudden you didn't hit it in February. Now you go to March and go, dang, you might be $120,000 off goal. And now you're like, okay, what do we do in March? And then now you're playing catch up and you're way behind. And so what ends up happening with your goals is you got to figure out what your goal is. You got to share your goal. By the way, if your team doesn't know what your goal is, and you have nobody, no one in your organization knows, we start the year basically talking about what the goal is for the year. And so you got to get everybody on the same page, especially your leadership team. And then how are you going to get there? You got to set strategy, and then recognize that if for whatever reason you don't hit it in January, if you're not on goal in January, what are you going to do in February? If you have a short month in February, see, this is where people don't hit goal. And this is why they sit at 1 point. I remember having a conversation with a guy one time, and he said, he took over his dad's practice, and his dad was doing 1.6 million. And after 10 years, he was doing 1.8. I was like, hell, that's inflationary. I mean, what happens is every year there was a new story of what he was going to do this year, or what was going to happen. But the truth is, he didn't look at January and say, what needs to happen in January for January to be successful? I would say you listen to this podcast and say, what is the number that I have to hit in January for it to be successful, for my rolling 12 to increase, for my valuation to increase? What is that number, and what am I willing to do to make that happen? Don't be reactive, be proactive. Get people involved and say, this is the number I have to hit in January. Our January last year was probably one of the best months out of the year, right? Because you just roll into the year like focused and driven, and then you should be coming back on these goals, because they should be closed loop systems. You should have accountability for these goals and come back to them. And so don't just keep these goals to yourself. That's called sad. I mean,
yeah, I think that you pointed out one of the biggest issues is people every year they write down a list of goals, but they don't have the keys to it. They don't have the strategy behind it. They don't have the tactics behind it, and they don't have a timeline. I think if you miss any of those three, you're setting yourself up for failure. And that's why people look after January and they're like, wow, I tried hard, but I didn't really get anything done, because I was just throwing stuff at the wall to try to hit the goals instead of having a strategy, tactic, what's the timeline to achieve it?
I always love when it's February and I ask somebody how you did last year, what were your revenues last year, and they say I got to ask the CPA. I'm like, what? What do you mean you got to ask the CPA? You got to ask the CPA how much money you brought in last year? Come on, guys. Like that's not,
Yeah.
if you literally right now don't know what your number is for 2021, you need to figure out your systems because they're wrong, because you should know what that number is. You should have had a goal, and you should have come into December 31st like, hey, did we hit it? Did we not? What do we got to do? Because that last week of December is such a great week to produce. Now, one of the things you mentioned, and by the way, you don't have to do this. I always take a week and prepare for the next year and think through the numbers, and I think through, hey, what went well this year, and what were our challenges, and how do we get better, and then I go back and I dust off Good to Great, and I dust off some of the fundamental books that you should do, and I read them again, and because some of those the fundamentals you come back to, and you're like, wow, we need to really pull that back in, and so what ends up happening is if you don't have that time on your calendar, I would go set it aside, even if it's a long weekend. A lot of you guys don't work Friday anyhow, so set a long weekend. Get out of your house, go plan some trip somewhere, get a cabin, and sit down and plan for 3 or 4 days. Even if you haven't done it, if you didn't do it, find the 3 days. And go put it on your calendar, go find a cabin, go find a remote place. And if you got to bring your team, like, 1 or 2 people to do it with you, go find that place, get remote, and then let's reset, right?
Yeah. And I think a lot of our, we did preach that towards the end of the year in our last few podcasts where we were like, you need to go do this. So hopefully a lot of our listeners were ahead of the ball and they actually went and did that. And I'm curious to see what some of the successes are. And I know we're going to start having some more and more conversations as the new year gets going. And I know some of our advisors are already having those conversations where they're saying, all right, so what are your goals? And a lot of them are coming in super prepared just because they've been listening to this podcast, and we give them the advice that you need to start setting this step up ahead of time. So I know, I've gotten great feedback from the advisors saying, yeah, most people, when we get on the phone call in January, they're ready to go. They know exactly what to do. They're asking for what strategy, tactics, and goals. And that's how people, when the new year starts, they go from, like you said, 2 million to 6 million or 4 million to 8 million. They have this exponential growth is because they took the time to put that in place and then get the strategy, get the tactics, get the timeline.
Well, and then you gotta, look, share your goal, get people excited, and look, be open to pushback. Let people push back on your goal. It's okay. I mean, I think that, I think that we have to have now, I don't think you should maybe you don't necessarily share the goal with the whole team. Maybe not everyone needs to be part of that conversation. Yeah. But I do think that there are key stakeholders within the company and people on your leadership team who should be part of that conversation. And I think it's key.
Yeah. I mean, you have to get the team involved, come up with a strategy, present it to the team, and then go full force. I think a lot of times organizations, especially dental practices, will go full force without the team's backing. And ultimately you're just going to be fighting an uphill battle unless you explain to the team why you're trying to do stuff. If you don't explain to them that, you're trying to get to this to ultimately help them out, they're never gonna be on board with it.
Well, the goal's like a dog barking in the background, right? We always know. So you gotta play on this shit. It's like a dog barking in the background, right? It's like It's always there, right? You get a little Pomeranian, like they're just barking, and you just don't understand why. And it's like, why is this dog barking at nothing, right? And it's probably staring at a wall, just barking, right? Because that's where our goals are. They literally are in the back of our heads all the time, barking and hitting us. And if we've got them under control, we feel great. But if we don't, then it's like this nagging thing. And whether we realize it or not, it's always haunting us. It's always in the background. It's always annoying us because we know that we're not hitting what we said we were going to hit. Mm-hmm. And that thing cannot happen. You've got to look at January. And if you listen to this podcast on January 21st, don't say, well, January's over. No, create a plan for a week. Whatever it is, get focused on what you have to do to hit that number. Keep track of your evaluation. And then I would argue too, this is a great time. These personal goals, just to move it to aside for a second, look, from a leadership standpoint, hire a personal trainer, get someone to make sure you get there, find a best friend who will meet you there. Like, you've got to show up in shape. I always love the cardio. I remember this doctor was talking to my son. He's a cardiovascular surgeon, and he's talking to my son about he needs to eat well and be in shape. And I'm like, this guy was like 400 pounds. I'm like, are you seriously telling my teenage boy that what he should be eating? I mean, have you looked at yourself?
Maybe it's your time for your New Year's resolution.
I think that there's something powerful, and I stay in shape, and I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but I do. I mean, I have kind of a nerdy diet, and I stay in shape. But when you're going to the gym consistently, there's this thing that happens where you feel muscular, okay? Now, maybe this is a testosterone thing, but you do. You feel muscular and you feel good, and you walk in, and, there's something about that, because I would argue you carry a different mentality. You carry a different swag. You carry a different, just a different gait. And people can feel that, and it rubs off on your team. So I would argue that not only do you, someone asked me last night, I was like, yeah, I was in bed early. And because when one of our team members sent me a text at 9:30, I was like, 9:36, I was like, man, I was already asleep. Now, why is that? Well, I'm a morning person, so, I'm up at 4:35. Well, so what ends up happening is I'm going to make sure I prioritize rest. I'm going to make sure that I'm ready to go. I'm going to hit my gym in the morning. I'm going to do my transfers. I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get my mind set. And then when I walk in, this is what people don't understand. By the time I walk in this office, I've already been up for hours. Yeah. And my day's already begun. And that's why when someone says, let's get on the phone at 6:30 at night, I'm like, man, you're talking the tail end here. Yeah. And look, everyone's different. Some of you are not morning people. You want to be night people, whatever you want. I don't care. The point is, do what you need to do. What are the things you need to do? And I'm arguing from a leadership standpoint. What do you need to do as a leader to motivate and inspire your team to be better? What do you need to do as a leader to walk in the door and them say, damn, she is in great shape? Whatever it is, what do you have to do to walk in? We have a doctor that we work with who's like a mountain climber, right? I mean, sending pics of like scaling mountains. I was like, holy moly. I mean, how do you not get inspired by that? Matthew, if I ever scale mountains, ice mountains, like
I think the important part is she's scaling mountains and has like a $5 million business. For those of you that are like, I can't find time to get away. She's finding time to go climb like Everest. I think her resolution next year is like to climb Everest or something.
Right. I'm going to pass on the Everest thing. That's never been mine, because once they start telling me you have like a 50% chance of dying, I pass. I'm good.
Yeah. I'm just not cold. Good. Beach. Yeah. I'll do something on the beach.
But I do. Look, I admire it though. Right. And I admire big goals. I admire the people that want to conquer Everest, because if you do, that's like, one of those things that you carry with you forever. It's legacy. But my whole point, if I ever, but if I'm ever on the side of a mountain with ice picks, like, someone take a picture, because I'm mounting that shit up on the wall, right? Because I'm like, I want everyone to see, that, right? That I'm climbing mountains in my free time. And the point is, you should be climbing mountains in your free time, whatever a mountain is to you. Whether it's reading books and becoming educated. Here's the interesting thing. I went through one of our advisors. We went through the best clients we work with, and I was looking at the most successful clients, and it was interesting. The most successful clients, first and foremost, are good people. And I was like, isn't that interesting? The most successful clients we work with are good people. What do I mean by a good person? They treat people well. They're fair. They have core values. They truly want to build an organization of substance and importance. They don't talk bad about their team. They're just good people. And what I mean by that is, now that doesn't mean they don't have a team member that they have frustrations with. That doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect. It just means that they really do care about people. And I thought that was interesting. They're also in shape. They're also, people that read. I'm telling you right now, Elon Musk, go back to Elon Musk. Elon Musk has said over and over again, how do you become an expert at anything? You just read. He's like, all you got to do is read. He goes, how did I become a rocket scientist, basically? I just read. Look, one of the things, if you study Elon Musk, you'll realize is he just read. There's a saying that all leaders are readers. Look, read. Now, today, we have Blinkist. You can get through a book in 5 minutes, right? Yeah. You got all of these apps you got to listen to. I mean, how many books are you going to read this year? If you don't get through one a month, I mean, that's a problem. I mean, you should at least get through one a month. Yeah. And you have no excuse for it. You got time in the morning, you got time at night, you got time between patients, you got time. It's just got to be a priority. But the more you read, the more it wants you to read. The more you want to read more, the more you want to get more material, more documentation, more, and you get excited. And we've got a group of doctors we're meeting out in Scottsdale this month. And look, I'm gonna tell you, they're all readers. They're all people who are, by the way, the mountain climber is going to be there, right? So,
Yeah.
so look, I mean, I will tell you that you walk in that room, you'll see people that are in shape, people that are driven, people that care about their appearance, people that care about their team, people that care all these characteristics. And so now, why am I telling you that? It's not to beat you up or to say, someone's better than you. That's not the point. The point is that if that is the attribute of successful people, then I would start following the attributes of successful people. Say, how do I get there? Is it easy as starting with a book? Yeah, it's easy as starting with a book. Where else would you start but a book? Book will get you inspired to maybe go to the gym and maybe eat differently. And so it starts off, and I would argue one of the reasons why people don't lose the weight is they didn't do a mental shift. I love this. I'm not against alcohol. I just don't drink alcohol because of I'm very focused in my life right now, and I don't have time for it, and I just don't. Okay, whatever. I have young kids. I have a business. I have multiple businesses, so I'm trying to be focused. So, anyhow, my point of saying this is to say I see online all the time on Facebook. It's like what do they call it? Sober January or what is it?
It's like the sober quarter. It's people try to just like, that's their New Year's resolution.
It's not drink for 30 days.
Yeah. It's like a detox from December.
But let me tell you what I think about that. I mean, I think it's a little bit, when someone says to me, like, that's like saying, I'm not going to eat shit for 30 days, but at the end of the 30 days, I'm going to start eating shit again. Yeah. So it's like, well, how is that a process that actually will work long term? Because if you say to yourself, well, I'm going to eliminate the thing that I feel like is having a negative influence on my life, but only for 30 days. And at the 31st day, I'm going to go right back to the thing that was actually bogging me down and making me not feel good. And so I'm going to go back to that again. And that's like, or you could learn how to not overindulge, or you could learn how to have balance in your life. Or that's not a plan. To say that I'm only going to have a habit, literally you're going into the month saying, I'm only going to have it for 30 days. And at the end of the 30 days, I'm going to go right back to what I was doing before. If there's ever a failure, if there was ever a setup for failure, that's it. It's like saying, I'm going to work really hard in my practice in January, but the rest of the months, I can't tell you what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I'm just going to hit goal this month and that's it.
And I'm just going to lay back, right? It's like, no, I mean, what is it? What can you sustain, right? What is it a sustainable goal? I would rather somebody come to me and say, look, I'm only going to have a drink on the weekends or whatever it is. Create a sustainable goal, something that actually is you can do that would last for the rest of your life. Yeah. And so I'm getting passionate again. I'm like, come on, let's hit these goals, guys. It's January. This is the time to get it going. Yep. You should be pouring into yourself. You should be pouring into leadership. But I'm telling you, if you don't have a book, you'll probably lose motivation. I'm telling you, if you don't have a trainer or a partner, you'll probably lose motivation. If you're not on a team, if you don't have anybody else with you, you'll probably lose motivation. If you're not sharing your goals with all the people around you, you're probably going to lose the motivation. If you're not counting and tracking and knowing exactly where you're at, you're probably going to lose motivation. Whatever you did in the years past that you didn't hit your goals, my recommendation would be don't do that again. Definition of insanity. You go, look, I didn't work. So I fire my trainer every now and then because I think, well, I'll go to the gym without him, And then what happens? 3 months later, I haven't been in the gym in 3 weeks. And I'm like, oh, that was stupid, Eric. And so I go back on it again, right? So when we have a process that doesn't work with it, it's in our business or our personal lives. We've got to look at that as leaders. It is so paramount for you to set the tone, for you to come in with the energy, for you to know the goals, to know where you're at, to motivate your team, to have conversations. And you've got to be prepared, and you've got to do whatever you need to do. So one of the things that, why, like I said, go back again, I want to be, every single day, I want to be clear-headed. I want to be focused. I want to be driven. I want to be ready to go. There's people that drink so much on the weekends that they're like, it takes Wednesday till they're back ready to go again. Yeah. It's like, you're going to lose half a week in the most important earning years of your life. I don't get it. Now, look, this isn't about alcohol. It's about habits that ultimately stop you from reaching your potential. And whatever that habit is, it can be food. I mean, some people eat so bad on the weekends, they can't get out of bed on Monday morning, right? Yeah. And so it's like, what do you have to do to energize yourself, to be focused, to be ready, and then count. Make sure you're counting and bring that energy to your practice because you'll inspire other people. You want to create leaders. You have to be the leader that attracts other leaders to your organization. Yep. But you got to be that person who walks in the door and people are like, I want to follow that gal. I want to follow that guy. I want to be around this person. I want to be, and then by the way, I'm getting fired up, man.
People will hear that in the marketplace, by the way. And you'll start to see, if 2021 was a year of struggle, which a lot of people had struggle finding talent, the year of 2022, why don't you try coming in a little bit more invigorated? Make that a passion. You'll start to see people start hearing that. Your team members will start talking. When they go home, they will start telling people, I don't know what Doc did in December, but they're fired up for this year, and they're constantly fired up. They're motivating us. They're doing all these things. And guess what? You're going to have people knocking on your door trying to get into your organization.
Well, it's truthfully the compound effect. And, how do you become successful? It's never overnight. And
yeah.
it is a constant piece of work that we're all, it's not what you did today. It's what you did over a period of time. 2021 was a period of time in your life, and it's gone, right? Whatever you did or didn't do in 2021, it's gone. I hope you've got, but I set a goal for 2021, and it was a goal that got me excited. I would set goals for 2022. And Matthew, you and I sat down at the beginning of last year. We set some goals, and we blew by them. I think that it's when you're focus, and you're a goal setting person. Like, you give Matthew a goal, you're going to make that stuff happen, right? And so look, you got to have people who are that driven towards it. But if Matthew didn't know the goal and he wasn't part of the conversation, then you got to have goals for your organization. So here's kind of, I'll leave the podcast because I can talk about this stuff all day long.
Yeah, we'll keep going.
You're like, kill the podcast at some point, guy. No, listen, here's the thing. Get ready for the year, okay? If you haven't built out a plan for the year, and I'm not talking about sitting down and saying, oh, we'll just go do this much this year. Sit down strategically. Why do you want that much revenue? Why do you want the organization to look like this? What would that actually get for your life? What's the purpose of that? What's the success criteria? If this was a great year, what would have to be true in this year for it to be a successful year? What would have to happen in the year for this to be the best year that you've ever had? Write that stuff down. How will you get there?
Yeah.
Right? And then I would start doing habits. You cannot attack this overnight. I think it's absolutely crazy for people to be like, I've been eating like crap for a year. Starting tomorrow, I'm going to eat cabbage salad or something.
Yeah.
Look, that's never going to work. All you got to do is, I always shared with people, I lost 50 pounds. Thank gosh no one on the podcast has ever seen me with 50 pounds heavier. But it happened over years. Why? Because you have to create something that sustains over a period of time.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is now I've kept it off for years and years and years. Well, because I found a way to eat that ultimately, right, works well because I had genetics fighting against me. Some of you that say, well, I'm genetically, well, I'm going to tell you now, I come from a big family. So genetically, I hope they never hear this.
Please don't
ever listen to this. But look, I mean, weight's a struggle for our genetics. And so what ends up happening is I wasn't going to allow that to defeat me. So I have to eat in a way that sustains, right, health. And that's important. And so do we all. We all need to do that because the greatest gift we can give to our families, by the way, is our own presence. But then it's the greatest gift you can give to your team. Be alert, be ready, set goals, get focused, know how you're going to do it, know how you're going to implement, create a strategy, bring people alongside your strategy. Don't be surprised if they push back and tell you can't do it. Scarcity mindset is the first place people go, is scarcity. Well, all the reasons you can't do it, all the reasons it's not going to work. That's okay. It's okay to look at those things. Those are all called obstacles. And we look at the obstacles and we create strategies to get around them, and then we overcome, and then we measure, and then we overcome, and then we measure, and then we overcome, and then we measure. Make this the absolute best year. And listen to the podcast. Make this part of your routine. This should be part of your routine every single week. Look, there's a group of doctors who, I'm going to tell you, they're going to listen to this podcast. They share with their friends the podcast. Isn't that interesting, right? The most successful people share this information with somebody and say, look, you got to listen to this podcast. And then at the end of it, imagine if you just got on the podcast once a week, wrote down keynotes with a friend of yours, a colleague, and you guys spent 30 minutes, 45 minutes having a cup of coffee and talking to it, even if it was virtual. And you talk through the concepts and how you could implement that. If you just did that on the compound effect for 52 weeks, it will change your life. It will change your practice. And it's significant. And then when you say, well, I need the next level of help, well, there's next levels of help. But at least start there. Right?
Yeah.
And make a commitment to that. Where else would you start by listening to this podcast, sharing this podcast? I would get a team member I would want someone to listen to it with me. because by myself, I'm probably going to get busy. But if someone's holding me accountable to listening to it and we do it once a week, then I know that I've got progress and I know that we're going to talk about the concept. So I would share it as well.
Yeah. I mean, 2022. Get excited, guys.
2022.
It's a new year.
Don't let your goals be like the dog barking in the background.
Big meaty goals, guys. Big meaty goals. I want to hear some crazy success stories. You know, one of the things that we always high five at the end of the year is when a doctor said, you know, we're here and they got to this, or they accomplished this, or they reduced this time in the chair, or they added this location. We want more success stories. We want to hear this. This is what we thrive off of. And we always use that feedback so we can help you guys out on podcasts as well. So as always, like and subscribe, and we're ready for 2022.